Thanks everybody for making the journey to the other side of Leicester, to the Tri-Line Suites. Yeah, much appreciated. I think it is a bit of a treat because you obviously get to see the pitch in all its glory, and it's quite spectacular this morning with all the frost and the sun shining down on it. It was raining on Monday when we got given the tour, so I'm really glad it's not pouring down. My voice, if you can't tell, is coming to the end of its conference time, so I'm going to do my best to not do too much talking. Yeah, it's great to see you all in the room. I'm really glad you've made the journey over to this session. I think it's a great session. I did organise it, but also I think it is a really, really good session. And thankfully, that sort of masterclass in delivering a presentation on the hoof by Rob just then, with no slides, has kind of teed up quite nicely what we're all going to talk about in the room today. So at the core of everything we do at NEA is a recognition of the importance of health within this agenda, and tackling health inequalities and tackling fuel poverty are the same thing. You know, they achieve the same outcomes in the long run, and we can't stress the importance of that enough in the work that we do through any number of our projects. And I know that many faces in the room are very familiar, so you'll probably be quite across a lot of the different projects that we have worked on in the past, but also a lot of the projects that we're developing, are in development, and that we plan to work on in the future, and some of the direction of that work. And it'd be great to have a bit of a discussion about that, and please, like we said yesterday, feel free to not just ask questions, but to kind of share some of your own insights and experiences on some of the projects that you've worked on, and how we tackle some of the knots, I guess, around and bringing that health and fuel poverty agenda together. As Rob said, how do you get the door open, not just necessarily to pinch the money and run, but to build those relationships, to get us all on the same page into why there are such obvious commonalities in tackling the two, thinking around health inequalities and fuel poverty as the same thing, housing and health. And one of the things that we do at NEA that we're sort of really proud of, that works really, really well, is that we work with government colleagues in the fuel poverty team to convene a health and housing working group, and we've done this for a number of years. In several reports that we've produced and others, we'll often find that one of the recommendations is how do we bring together those working in this space better, how do we tackle some of the silo working and some of the challenges when we're all working at pace with limited time, limited budgets, and how do we bring some of those people together. And one of the things that we're involved in with those colleagues is coordinating that health working group. We meet quarterly. It's very much a national level sort of coordinated action, so we have representation from NICE, from different government departments, from much of the third sector, Curie, who's in the room today, thanks Leah for joining us, from Citizens Advice, from Public Health England, or what is now UXA and OHID, and have that real sort of strategic, but also that practical, what are people doing to bring together the two agendas around housing and health, and how can we support one another's work, whether that's feeding into briefing notes or video resources or energy advice resources. And it's a really active group. So one thing that I'd be really keen to is if there's people in the room who don't know much about that work that we do, or think that you might benefit or might have some input in it, please do grab me in this session or in the coffee break afterwards, and let's have a chat about it. But when I was thinking about doing the session, I think that NEA has had a health and energy session, and it's important at every single conference we've ever done. And I wanted to try and think about how we might go beyond that, so how we might go beyond demonstrating the links between health and energy, and beyond sort of that really well-established evidence base that now sort of unquestionably demonstrates the links between the two. We know that's there. It's really important to keep adding to that evidence base and to keep banging that drum, but we know that that link is sort of unquestionable now that the two are there. Make homes warmer, people are healthier. Leave them in cold homes, they are unhealthier. Like, that link is unquestionable now, and so how we tackle that and how we take action against that is kind of the important next steps. And a big part of that about shining a spotlight on examples of best practice where they exist. And I know a lot of that work around services and schemes that exist, and the Slido that I was asking you all to take part in was much about that, kind of sharing your examples of the work that you're doing. So in this session, we're going to draw on some of that cross-sectoral expertise. So not just thinking around how we draw those links, but the experiences of different organisations, and I'll let the speakers introduce themselves, different organisations that have delivered or are delivering important elements of this work around aligning those two agendas around health and housing, services and programmes, and thinking about data and strategies and partnerships. And future-proofing, so thinking about things like net zero and passive house and future-proofing as well. So yeah, going to consider sort of key areas around data sharing, partnerships, health sector, strategy development, sharing best practices, as well as health improvement in the context of net zero. Yeah, and then we'll all come together for a bit of a discussion at the end. And like I said, it'd be great to hear from some of the work that you're doing, as well as put some questions to our speakers. I think that's everything I kind of wanted to ramble on about at the start. So, yeah, without further ado, I'm going to hand over to our first speaker, who's done some fantastic work in the past before us, but is also now heavily involved in doing some work with us. So, yeah, Bill Purvis, thanks very much.
Hello, everybody. Hiya. Just getting my voice back from shouting last night for hours in that pub. So excuse me if I'm fading a little bit. But anyway, so yeah, I work at Derbyshire County Council. I just want to see how many local authorities we've got in the room. They always say know your room, don't they? Put your hand up if you're in a local authority. Yes, I was chatting to you from Suffolk, wasn't I, yesterday? And gentlemen, where are you from?
Sefton Council.
Sefton?
Yeah.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah, okay. Did a bit of work there years ago. Right, excellent. So only 2 councils, right. I've got a funny feeling not many people really know how councils sort of operate and actually what they do. And this is quite important when it comes to looking for solutions. We've heard a lot about problems, haven't we, yesterday? And I'm sort of trying to make this a bit of a solution-focused sort of talk, as it were. So, do we know how many sort of tiers of local government have we got? Anyone got any ideas? 3, 2, 1, 4, 5? People don't really know, do they? 4. Well, you've got county councils, like Derbyshire as a county, and you've got district councils within there, so there's 8 district councils within Derbyshire. It's the same in every area. But because we've got Derby City, that's what's called a unitary authority. So that has all the functions of the county council and the district council together. Now, the only reason why I say this is because the district councils actually have the function of looking after the sort of housing problems, stock condition, fuel poverty. And county council looks after the adult social care side of it. So you've actually got a disconnect. We're trying to put together a project which deals with housing and health, but they're both delivered by different parts of local government. So what I've tried to do in my project is bring both of those bits together. So we've got a health and housing project to help people in fuel poverty. And this, I just really briefly, I used to work at a district council in High Peak, which is in the Peak District, lovely part of the world. Many years there, environmental projects, energy efficiency projects, etc. It sort of dawned on me I ought to do some feedback on some of the people that we managed to help through some of the schemes that used to run. And I was asking questions like, do you think your health's improved? Have you got any health conditions? And I was quite surprised, quite a lot of people were writing back on the surveys, yeah, I've got asthma, I've got, high blood pressure and this, that and the other. And I wasn't even targeting poorly people, but I was finding that quite a lot of people did have health conditions. This should have dawned on me 20 years ago, not 12 years ago. And so I thought, right, there's got to be some mileage in actually taking this project into a more focused sort of approach, looking for specifically poorly people. So I approached the Director of Public Health at Derbyshire County Council 10 years ago, put this little idea to him that actually, this would be quite a good preventative project. You heard from Rob this morning talking about how public health deals with the population-based problems, and he really liked the idea, and he gave us some funding to set up to employ 4 people. So I've got 4 people on my team and myself, and the idea being that we would prevent people from becoming poorly by addressing their warmth needs. And about 7 years ago, public health got subsumed into adult care. So we're now adult care and adult social care and health. The health is the public health bit, and the adult care is the bigger social service side of it. So public health is a sort of a smallish section of the overall social care programme. But that meant that I was able to take the project from trying to use data initially, and James is going to talk to us about data. We were a bit inexperienced at it. When we first set off, we started getting the GPs involved, GPs writing to householders with specific health conditions. We were struggling to find the right sort of energy efficiency sort of data to merge that together, along with the benefits data to find that little target in the middle, someone's poor, and cold. And it didn't really work. The data data quality was rubbish. We were getting very, very poor referrals. But when I got into adult care, suddenly we had access to lots of people's health information, not NHS referenced, but all referenced by experience from social workers working with householders. And that meant that we could really refine our offer down to some very specific people that needed our help, rather than a population-based approach. We went right down to, like, let's deal with the most vulnerable. And my challenge was also that public health, well, we've had a lot of money off them over the years, probably about 3 million quid actually over the last 10 years. They give us about 300,000 every year to do the sort of preventative side of it. And adult care want a sort of a reactive side of, they want a reactive response. And what I mean by that is, I don't know, there's something called the Better Care Fund. Has anybody heard of the Better Care Fund? Yay, one person. It's the NHS. The NHS budget is given out to county councils effectively, who then distribute it out to districts for things like your disabled facility grants, stair lifts, these kind of things. That's all funded through, level access showers and all that kind of stuff. That's all funded through the Better Care Fund. It's many, many, many millions, maybe 45 million or something in Derbyshire, of which about 6 or 7 million of that is ring-fenced for something called it's the Improved Better Care Fund. So I note Suffolk, look up little I, BCF, and you'll find that your county council's got a budget for that. And the Improved Better Care Fund is really well aligned with the idea, the objectives of the BCF are really well aligned with trying to deal with fuel poverty, in the sense that the first thing is preventing people going into hospital, because it's funded by the NHS. The second one is to reduce what they call the transfer of care. So that's getting people out of hospital, so they're not in there, stuck in hospital, and trying to reduce that time down as much as possible. And then the third one is enabling people to come home to a home that carers can deliver their care packages. So care packages are like gold dust. The social workers that we work with are always trying to put together, 3 visits a day, 4 visits a day, this kind of thing, for people that need that reablement support to help them live independently at home. And if they can't get work in that house because it's cold, there's no hot water, it's unhygienic, etc., that care package gets lost. And rightly so, the carers go, I'm not working in there, and actually they've got the upper hand. Since COVID, everyone's realised how important carers are in keeping people alive in their homes. And we'll lose a care package, and that's a nightmare, because then that person stays unwell and goes back into hospital again. So those are the 3 sort of objectives: prevention, delayed transfer of care, reduction of time in hospital, and enabling carers to deliver their care package. So then we've got a programme which deals with public health issues and adult care issues. What does it actually deliver? So although we've got this core funding from the BCF, I bring in money from another acronym, ECO, Energy Company Obligation. You should have heard of that. Well, that's like a £1.5 billion fund running up till 2026, and you can access that for all sorts of different types of heating measures. So my programme, whilst we do energy advice, that's fine. The people that come to me, the clients that come to us, have no heating. So it's not like they need advice on how to, to reduce their consumption. They haven't got any consumption because often the boilers are knackered, or they're running sort of some 50-year-old coal-fired back boiler type thing, which is costing an absolute fortune to run, as well as doing their respiratory problems no good because he's using coal, and et cetera, and indoor air quality. Rob touched on that as well. So that's another public health tick: indoor air quality improved, get rid of the coal fires, put in a gas boiler. It's not very green. I do get that. Putting methane-based systems into people's homes isn't the future. But for these sort of people that are falling into fires, or using 2 broken electric storage heaters that are 30 years old, etc., or some really incredibly expensive oil-based system, they need some support, and often the only support we can really give them is a gas boiler. About 15% of the systems that we do put in are air source heat pumps with ventilation and proper insulation, and you can get them fully funded through ECO as well. So we basically say we can do anything. We'll put 1 storage heater in a room. If all you're doing is sleeping in the living room and you've got a gas fire, take the gas fire out, put a storage heater in, because your upstairs is hoarded, maybe. We deal with a lot of hoarding people. Probably do about 50 hoarding cases a year. And this isn't just like a bit of untidiness. This is, rooms full up to the top of the windows with stuff. And we can't see the wall to put the radiators on. So we have to clean the houses out to get the heating system in. Or sometimes people won't part with stuff, so we leave it and we just clear out one room where they're sleeping. So this is sort of like the thin end of the wedge type. It's not your population-based thing. It's really dealing with those very, very sort of seriously, often very mentally unwell people as well. You don't live like this by choice. You know, you've got issues if you're choosing to live in a state of disrepair and dysfunction like that. So you know, we have to choose the right contractors as well to make sure that they can actually deal with people like this. So they're all trained up to understand how to softly work with people that are anxious and depressed, etc. So so being able to provide any solution in any situation, that's what we kind of say. From a £5,000 full heating system through to an electric blanket. We give out hundreds of electric blankets every year, along with other things like that. So appropriate solutions, flexible with those solutions as well. And they're all free. No one pays anything for it. We don't ask for top-ups or anything like that. That's just not fair. Average savings for people in my group, a lot of them have nothing, literally nothing, maybe £2,000, £2,000 or £3,000. Can't bury yourself for that. So, you know, if they spend £2,000 or £3,000 putting the heating out, sorting it out, they're knackered, aren't they? Excuse my French, but, you know, they've got nothing left at all. So, really quickly touch on eco. Just that, like I say, it's a big budget. It's massive. You can access it more flexibly now, in a way, than you could under the previous round. There's more solutions available. I thought it was going to be very low carbon based, and I was going, oh my goodness, I'm going to lose all the funding for gas boilers. But anything over about 16 or 17 years old, any heating system, if it's a non-condensing sort of boiler, you can replace it with insulation. I know Kate's going to talk a bit more about really pucker, future-based solutions, passive house stuff. But for our clients, quick and easy work. You know, 3 or 4 days, get a full heating system in. 1 day, get a boiler swapped. Probably get it done if you need to within a week or 10 days. So it's quite quick, because every day they're in hospital, it's 500 quid in a bed. Every week they're in a care home, it's 1,500 quid now. That's doubled. We're paying the care home bills at county council for these people, so we don't want them in there any longer, and they don't want to be there any longer. Slightly rambling, but referrals. Quick one on referrals. Having heard the sort of clients that I'm looking to find and support, would you anybody like to put a hand up and give me an idea of what sort of organisations do you think, or people, or teams would be best suited to send me a referral so that I go, thank you very much, that's the person I'm looking for. Anyone want to suggest a referral organisation? Hospital discharge teams, right? That's right. We'll put them in the box. Hospital discharge teams. Occupational therapists, yeah, absolutely, because they're getting their health professionals, yeah. Fantastic. Yeah, Derbyshire Fire and Rescue Service, front line, getting into people's homes. Brilliant. One more.
Housing Association maintenance.
Ooh, I tend to tell them where to go, actually, because that's their responsibility. I'm not going to spend adult care money. It's really frustrating. I don't know how many housing associations there are in the room. One, hello. Well, I might have to offend you slightly, but they come to us and they go, right, this person's been living in this house. It's completely hoarded up to the ginnels. Can you come and clean it out? And we go, well, how has that happened? That's obviously been like that for years. How come you don't see these people? And they go, well, it's their responsibility. Sorry, I'm just quoting some of the housing associations around my area. And they go, well, it's the responsibility of the household to keep the house, clean and tidy. And I go, well, they've obviously got mental health problems, haven't they? And then they go, yeah, in that case, it's social care's problem. And we go, right, well, who's going to pay for this then? And so we have these very touchy conversations, like how are we actually going to deal with someone in that situation when it is obviously in the contract, their leasehold, their responsibility, and it's a social care thing, but we don't know they're in that situation. And we say, well, don't you send the heating engineers in every year to service the boilers? And they go, oh yeah, they get a service every year. Well, doesn't that guy report back to you that there's a problem in that house? And they go, whoa, we've got 10,000 properties, And we go, yeah, okay, fair enough. What do you expect us to do? It is a real job. And we try and work with the housing associations, and I do pay to clean their houses out unofficially, because otherwise they're either at risk of going into hospital or they can't come home. So the problem with the discharge, okay, so what I'm going to touch on really quickly is the quality of the referrals is really important. And so you might think that hospital discharge is it's probably the one that saves the most money. If a hospital discharge team rings me and says, we've got someone coming home, it's always Friday, they go, I'm coming home on Monday, can you sort something out for them? They often haven't been into that person's home. They don't really know much about their finance. They know they're really poorly, and they know they need to get them out of hospital. And that person's in bed going, and then, you know, the discharge team are going, is your house okay to go home to? And they go, yeah, get me out of here, you know. And people say they want to go home when the home isn't fit to go home to. So it's a kind of vague-ish referral. It's usually one with good intention that that person said they need some support, but it's because they don't have eyes on in the house. So social workers are really good. They understand the patient, they're in the house, they see the situation, they know what they can cope with. Fire and rescue, very, very good, because I mean there's a complementary bit of work there that we do in terms of clearing all the hoarding out, obviously reduces the fire risk and escape routes, etc. So, you know, it benefits the fire service. But the quality referrals come from people that have been in people's homes. That's definitely the best way. That's why I kind of abandoned data a little bit, because you know, little needles in a haystack, isn't it, that we're looking for. Yeah, hospital discharge, social workers, fire and rescue, and housing officers in the district councils. So we've had an energy partnership going across Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire for 25 years. There's Miranda here. She's not. She has no chance. No, she's in Nottinghamshire. And it's the longest standing energy partnership, which means all the district councils work together collectively to put bids in to the government, etc. And we have a coordinator who coordinates all the work. I'm conscious of time. But what it means is that we've got a really good working relationship with those district councils in terms of, I know all the housing officers and the bosses by name, you know, all around the county, and they go, all right, Bill, can we do this, that, and the other? So partnership working gives us really good referrals. Right, I'm going to finish on, this section's called Warm Homes, Healthy Futures, isn't it? I think the warm homes bit, I think we know how to get a house warm. We just about know where to get the money from. It's the healthy futures bit that's quite interesting for me. So apart from the fact that your health condition is going to improve, okay, if you've got a long-term health condition, that often means that it's intractable. It's going to kill you eventually. You know, COPD, those kind of things, you don't really recover from those. They're just so what we're looking to do is reduce the rate at which your health deteriorates. That's about the best we can do in a lot of these situations. But the thing that gets me is a lot of people say to us, I'm feeling I can cope more with the world now. You know, you've taken a big weight off my mind. I've come out of my shell. I didn't really want to ask for help because I felt embarrassed or because, you know, it is a state. And now I'm feeling like I ought to look after myself more. I've got my self-esteem back a little bit. You've taken a big burden of weight off my mind about the financial issues of finding a few £1,000s to sort my property out. And ultimately, they become resilient. They're starting to become more resilient people than they were before. And I think that's a really key thing in terms of a mental benefit in a healthy future, in stopping them going back into decline again, and then going to hospital and repeating that cycle. So I think the healthy future bit for me is about people having an ability to sort of develop the characteristics of a resilient person, which is not that tangible. And last of all, don't forget social workers, carers. They all breathe a big sigh of relief as well, because they go, that's someone off my books. At least I know they're warm and safe at home, and we can move on to the next person. So there you go. Sorry, I have taken up about 10 or 15 minutes, but there you go. Thanks. Okay. Cheers.
Thanks ever so much for that, Bill. I think really, really demonstrating there, exactly as Rob was talking about, the art of public health and getting really creative and thinking about all the different mechanisms, levers, conversations, ways in which you can play and bend and mould. And so, yeah, really, really interesting to hear about that. Next up, we're going to hear from Kate de Selincourt, and I'll let you introduce your talk yourself. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Kate de Selincourt. I'm a bit short. I'll stand over here. I'm a writer with a sort of science background, and I started off writing about health in the beginning of my career. In fact, I've kind of come full circle because I can remember Michael Marmot when he had all his hair and it was black. Because as a young health journalist, but I've moved across into construction, so that's kind of my speciality, is the performance of buildings and how that impacts on the people who occupy and use the buildings. And the work that I've done most recently has been for the Passive House Trust. And the kind of headline of the work was, how do passive house buildings benefit the occupants? And although, obviously, you know, there aren't that many passive houses, the way that passive house works means that there's sort of lessons in terms of what we can do for people's well-being in their buildings, including particularly people with very low incomes. So that's me. So as we've said, we kind of know what people need in terms of warmth. I think you probably noticed, if you heard me yesterday, I've got an absolute bee in my bonnet about ventilation and air quality, and you know, and how important it is to see that as a package with warmth. And Peter Rickaby has got, should take a lot of credit for dragging ventilation and air quality into past 2035 and the retrofit standards. But unfortunately, it's still not seen. It's not part of the carbon agenda, so it does get left out and it gets underfunded. And also, these quiet and low pollution, other than damp, and summer comfort are also important. Quiet homes are homes where you can sleep, homes where you're not wound up by your neighbours or the noisy traffic. Summer comfort means not being too hot, which is also very dangerous for vulnerable people. We do, as a nation, our construction industry does all these things really badly. So this is the kind of thing that we actually build. This is thermal imaging, which I expect you're all familiar with. You can see that the wall behind that bed, no insulation between the studs. These are modern new buildings. This is a loft hatch, and you can see the cold air is pouring out from the loft space into the home. And this is absolutely typical, which means that most new houses use kind of at least half as much heat, if not twice as much as they're intended to, which means the occupants have to spend twice as much or be much colder. And we have exactly the same situation with ventilation. Those light green bars, this is all new homes again. Light green bars are what Part F said should be being supplied into the home, and the dark green bars are what was actually tested to have been put in. And this is absolutely typical. Another study looked at 80 new build homes, and I think 5 of them complied with the regulations, and the other 75 didn't. And not only that, you can put in the right ventilation, but if you don't put it, if you use a cheap system, it's likely to make people cold, and so they do that. And it may also be noisy and letting in street pollution, so people close it off for that reason. So air quality and air movement and warmth are intimately tied, and to get a healthy home you have to get both of them right, as I said yesterday, otherwise you get a warm home that's damp and full of mould. And you're probably familiar, but just to say, it's not just humidity, it's a cold surface, because you've got a concrete balcony and the cold concrete goes into your house, and then it's a cold surface and mould grows on that. Obviously under ventilation, and people who have to dry their laundry inside, and everyone has to dry their laundry inside, bar a few lucky people really. So we need to build and retrofit homes that can accommodate that completely normal human behaviour. And we can do it. This is a passive house social housing estate in East Anglia, and it was monitored over 10 years. I mean, this is 2018 prices. It will have gone up since, obviously, but those are the kind of bills people were having, which just transformed people's lives, as you can imagine. Their homes were comfortable and they had spare money for the first time. Also, you have heat recovery ventilation, which I don't know, who's familiar with how heat recovery ventilation works? I expect a lot of people. Anyone like me to explain it? Okay, right, so heat recovery ventilation, there are some sort of misconceptions about heat recovery, which is that it recirculates the air. It doesn't. How it works is you've got the cold fresh air comes into the ventilation unit, and the warm stale air from your kitchen and bathroom comes in from the house, and they sort of pass each other through a sort of long, thin tube that's folded up on itself. So most of the warmth from the indoors is transferred into the fresh air. So the damp warm air becomes damp cold air, and it's blown out the house, and then the cold fresh air becomes warm fresh air, and it's supplied to all the rooms in the house, which means it's comfortable. And it also means that because it's all comes through ducts in an ideal system, you can also do it through the wall. But if you've got it through ducts, you can draw the air from the roof or from the back where there's not traffic, and you don't have grills in the windows, so it helps the house stay really quiet. You only open the windows if you want to. You've got all the fresh air, so and it makes such a difference because you get the constant movement of air, and people can dry their laundry inside and they don't get mould and damp. This is somebody living in a passive house now who didn't before. Okay, as we know, people who are elderly or perhaps having cancer treatment, or people who've had a spinal injury tend to need a bit more warmth. And if you do this in a properly insulated, properly ventilated house, it only costs a little bit more. Whereas you might be looking at sort of £60 or £100 a week to keep a house at 22 degrees if it's not really well constructed. And the other thing, of course, is if you're not heating, if you've still got no money and the bills are so high, then you might not have the heating on at all, or you might have to turn it off. And this is calculations of the orange line is a passive house which is built with good insulation, it's airtight, it's got good glazing, and it's got heat recovery ventilation. And if you turn off the heating when it's really cold, yes, the temperature does drop, probably not that comfortable, but in a typical modern house, and heaven forfend an older house that's even worse insulated, it quickly drops to about 8 degrees, and that difference is, it is life or death for some people, and it's, it might save a hospitalisation. And you can build to this, you can retrofit to this standard. It's not straightforward, but you can take a lot of the principles that passive house has developed and apply them in a retrofit to get that kind of resilience, which means that even if people have opted not to put the heating on because they need the money to get to work or they want to buy their children Christmas presents, then they're still safe. And this kind of construction is transformational. It really does transform people's health. I mean, you've probably seen these kind of stories, but it is remarkable. And this is some people, this is the award-winning Goldsmith Street scheme in Norwich. They visited, there was some snow on the ground when the journalists got there. And it's really, really warm, no heating at all, and this is commonly reported. So we can build like this, but we don't. Because the people in the buildings are not the priority. The priority is turning over the construction and getting the rent or the money. If to build to this standard costs perhaps anything between hardly any more at all and about 10% more, depending on how well you plan it. That was a bit about airtightness, but I've talked about that already, how it keeps the noise out. And people worry about airtightness because they think it means the house won't breathe. But obviously it's not the job of the house to supply you with air. It's not the job of the brick wall to supply you with air. It's the job of the ventilation system to supply you with air. And actually if the brick wall is airtight, then the brick wall keeps you warm and it keeps out the noise. And then you choose where the air comes in and where it's supplied. But you can't choose where you put your leaks in a brick wall. So why don't we do it? And why don't we retrofit like this? Because we could make homes more airtight while we're retrofitting. We could put in proper ventilation. You can put MVHR into an existing home. You can do the full ducted system in some buildings, and there are also systems where you just do a room at a time when you kind of get inside and run the ducts. But it's not a priority because retrofit is done mainly under carbon programs. It's so refreshing to hear that public health are getting more and more awake to the importance to public health, but still tends to be mainly focused around affordable warmth, which is obviously critical. But it saddens me that we don't look at the whole well-being of the occupants. We know that people don't just need warmth, they also need fresh air. Ideally, they also need peace and quiet so they can sleep and study. But we don't do that because that's not how we appraise things. You know, you get so many carbon points for your eco installation, and eco doesn't care whether there's ventilation or not. In fact, you know, it obviously might use up a bit more heat. So, you know, it's seen as like a contradiction that people say, oh, the tension between warmth and ventilation. If you look at the occupant, there's no tension, they need both. You know, it's ridiculous to kind of compromise two aspects of somebody's health. So that's why I've got Mr. Topsy-Turvy on there, because I think that's how we do it, topsy-turvy. So I would really like to see construction and retrofit to be not about carbon. Obviously carbon's really important. I've climbed on bulldozers in my youth to stop motorways being built, you know, passionately concerned about climate change. But while we're in there doing the decarbonisation, for goodness sake, it's people's lives and it's people's homes. Why aren't we looking at their health and their well-being at the same time? It's not often you can get a team of building designers and building surveyors and construction people into someone's home. We all know that it's a thing, it's an undertaking. And then to just do half the job and leave the other half hanging off, it's like putting on half a coat, really. I mean, just why wouldn't you put on the other half as well and not walk out half naked? So, because, and fabric first, this is obviously the way to do the comfort and the thermal comfort and the no cold patches, but at the same time put in the right services that people can use, services that fit with people's lives, and then you're saving the NHS and you're getting people achieving at school because they can do their homework and they're not off school again with another cough and mum's not having to miss another shift. So it seems a bit crazy to me that we do it the way we do. This is some of the work I've done. This is a kind of summary which kind of explains how Passive House works. It's on the Passive House Trust website, the pink one. That's my boss's daughter's. So she's got that's a Passive House retrofit. That's a standard council semi that she and her husband own, and they retrofitted completely to Passive House. She told me when I last saw her that when they'd been to stay with some relatives over Christmas, and when they came home, she said one of her daughters went up and hugged the banisters and said, "Mummy, we love this house," because they'd been so uncomfortable at the relatives. And the one with the QR code is the great long bit of research I did with all the sources and the references about all the health, the warmth, the ventilation, the quiet, the other pollutants. So anything if you need to justify any particular kind of home improvement, if you look in there, you can find something you can wave at public health and the NHS. So that's me.
Thanks, Kate. Loads of really, really interesting insights there. I'll leave that up on the screen just for a couple of seconds while I introduce our next speaker for you to grab hold of the report. Kate would be happy for you to reach out and contact, and I'm sure have some questions. I think some of the eye-watering stuff is about how not as expensive as you'd think. So some of that mind shift around how expensive we think some of these very high standards are, and it's simply not the case from some of the evidence that's there. So it's really interesting stuff. Thanks. Next up, we're going to hear from Leah Steadman from Curie, who's going to talk about a bit of work that we've been working on, specifically around how we understand strategies and processes that are already in place and some of the challenges around that. So thanks very much, Leah.
I have a bit of a cold, so excuse me if I erupt in some sort of fit of sneezing or need to blow my nose. It might make this more effective, I don't know. And just press the next one. Thank you. So as Danielle said, ourselves, Marie Curie and NEA produced Taking the Temperature and published it in October of this year. So we know the consequences of struggling to meet increased costs can be severe. We've kind of already touched on it in the other presentations. It can lead to new infections, make existing symptoms flare up or become worse and affect mental health. In the worst cases, enduring life in a cold, poor quality home may even hasten death. So this report here details collaborative research undertaken by NEA and Marie Curie to examine how the recommendations in NG6 are being delivered with specific consideration of what this means for people at the end of life in England and Wales. Great. Since its publication in 2015, the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence, NICE, NG6 guideline, has been recognised as a landmark resource for understanding and deploying appropriate action to support those at risk of worsening health because of cold homes and fuel poverty. The NG6 guideline covers reducing the health risks, including preventable deaths, associated with living in a cold home. So there are 12 recommendations in total, and they're not currently on a statutory footing. In addition, there has been no analysis carried out to assess the specific delivery and impact of the recommendations with a consideration of key vulnerable groups, for example, those at the end of life, a group we know could experience a vicious cycle of fuel poverty and are among the most vulnerable to the health and well-being consequences of poverty and cold and poor housing. So in terms of the methodology, out of the 12 recommendations, we chose to focus on recommendations 1, which is to develop a strategy, 2, ensure there's a single point of contact for health and housing, 3, provide tailored solutions for people living in cold homes, 7, discharge of vulnerable people from health and social care settings to a warm home, and 11, raising awareness among practitioners and the public. So we initially did a desk research of all available information on local authority and council websites. We reviewed joint strategic needs assessments, JSNAs, and health and wellbeing strategies for links of references to NICE, NG6 or excess winter deaths. Our main source of information came from Freedom of Information requests, which we issued to local authorities in England and Wales, asking about recommendations 1, 2, and 3, and you'll see the kind of rate of response on the slide. And we also sought information on recommendation 7 from the Integrated Care Boards in England. And finally, we sent FOIs and got responses from the Office for Health Improvement and Disparities, OHID, and the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero on what they were doing about raising awareness, which is recommendation 11. From there, we built up the data which encompasses this report. So the next few slides are the recommendations in our report, which you can read through as I continue to speak through the report. So through this data collection, we were able to establish some really good models of practice at local authority and ICB level. We have highlighted some case studies in our report, such as the London boroughs of Richmond and Wandsworth councils producing and implementing a winter plan that is based on the cold weather plan for England. Also, NHS Herefordshire, and I can pronounce Worcestershire. I use it in my cottage pie, but I cannot pronounce it. So apologies. As an Irish person, I'll teach you some Irish later. Integrated Care Board has a range of support services, including the provision of energy-related advice and information that can be accessed by vulnerable people being discharged from hospital. And I know Bill kind of spoke about that earlier. However, many local authorities noted the number of excess winter deaths reported in their area for the previous year. There were not a lot of solutions identified to prevent these deaths. The research highlights that progress to date has been patchy and inconsistent, and our recommendations reflect the need for further analysis of NG6 and the programmes or schemes that are delivered under it. In some cases, FOI responses from local authorities in Wales did not acknowledge the NG6 guidance or note if it was something that they were following. Other responses explicitly outlined that NG6 guidance was not a mandatory element of their work and that they had no detail to share. Therefore, one of our recommendations is to better understand what is happening at local authorities in Wales. We found limited evidence of how strategies were assessing heating and insulation needs, except for how this may fall under fuel poverty schemes or housing initiatives. But this was not typically clear within JSNAs and health and wellbeing strategies. In addition, no evidence was identified on the ways in which strategies and plans are evaluated or monitored. Due to the changes in the Health and Care Act, which means palliative care services must now be provided by law, placing a new legal duty on ICBs to commission palliative care services, we believe that NG6 should be part of this work. There was limited mention of training for frontline professionals, so we added that as a recommendation, and evidence relating to how tailored solutions were in place was mostly found in detail linked to the ways in which local authorities in England are supporting residents through the energy and cost of living crisis. However, not all advice and support should be in one format, and we would encourage local authorities and ICBs to provide a variety of different supports to vulnerable people. So just my final slide is my details if you need me, but just to note that our research had limitations while we received information about programs and practices at work in local authority areas and ICBs. Our research does not review the impact on successes of these programs. It is clear from the current climate and extensive evidence between health and cold homes that focused on urgent action is needed to tackle fuel poverty among people with a terminal illness. It is unacceptable that any dying person should spend the end of their life in cold, damp, but uncomfortable conditions, deprived of the best possible quality of life because of unaffordable heating costs. Our analysis shows that there is still much work to be done to deliver universal action on the recommendations set out in NG6. This new research hopes to take steps towards this, setting out crucial evidence of the extent to which relevant authorities and bodies are implementing this guidance. So that was a quick whistle-stop tour of it all. I'm sure Danielle can add anything on she wants, but thank you for having me here today.
I'll save any more discussion of that work for the discussion session, but really interesting, and kind of first mention of ICBs as well. I think Rob kind of pointed towards it as well, and some sort of discussion of what happens at that sort of level as well. We are running tightish on time, but I think we're okay, and I think the morning's just going to flurry through at this pace, the excitement of the half day after the full day at conference. So we're going to hear now from our last speaker, James, who's going to come and talk to us about very clever ways of understanding data around health and housing and energy. Thanks, James.
I'm from Worcestershire, and it amazes me. No, it's amazing me that the most famous thing from there used its name, because it's a stupid name.
I love the sauce, though.
The sauce is fine. Thank you very much for having me. I'm going to be really quick. I don't need enough time. As soon as I have this working. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, everyone. I work for a small consultancy called Egnida Innovation. My background is actually making tools for an energy company. So I'm a big fan of Passive House, a big fan of all those things. We did a calculation once of how many cats you'd need to keep a Passive House warm in the heating. It's not that many, but what you do with them in the summer is inhumane. We specialise in making tools for the energy industry to help vulnerable customers. And Northern Gas Networks came to us a while ago and said they wanted to have a way of identifying not just where vulnerable customers might be, but what might be the factors that are affecting them. We are now partnered up with Northern Gas Networks, Cadent, Northern Power Grid, SS, Scottish and Southern Electricity Networks, and Google, and we've created this tool. The good news is that whilst the utilities will pay for it, and thank you very much for doing that, if you're working in vulnerability, it's free for you to use, and you can have access, and you can play with it, and you can talk to me after if you'd like to do that. I'm going to show you what it does. I'm going to tell you a joke, not tell you I'm funny. So let's have a look at some cold homes. Let's see where you have EPCs with a rating of D, E, F, and G. So we can switch that on, and we'll do it as a percentage of the property of the housing stock in an area. Now, obviously, this is only based on properties we have EPCs for. As you see, you get a heat map and a slightly 3D heat map. Let's zoom in on, we're in Leicester, aren't we? So let's zoom in on Leicester. How good's my geography? Derby, Stoke. We're in Leicester area. let's call it near as damn it. So as you see, as you zoom in, you can go from a local authority area down to a lower super up area. What we want to see is how this affects health as well. So we also have taken all of the GP referrals that they publish monthly. I want to go back a second. Hang on. Bill has this scalpel. Bill is a surgeon. He is going in, he's finding these individual people because Bill has that data. I've got a baseball bat. that you can have a go with. But like, what we did is we took all of the GP stuff and we took every single postcode in the UK and we said, how close are you to 3 GP surgeries, and so what's your likelihood of living with these conditions? So people keep mentioning mental health, it's a big one. So where are people living in cold homes and living with mental health conditions? And if you give it a second, it will tell you. There we go. So you can see that you'll get a slightly different data set, it will rise and fall. You can then start mixing that in with, okay, well, what do you think school outcomes look like if you're in a cold home and you're living with mental health conditions? Let's have a look at an average attainment score per pupil, and we'll see percentage, and we'll ask for, let's show us the areas where it's got low amounts. And you'll see that you get red areas that go even more red, green areas that go even more green. And so if you are working in this sort of area and you want to be able to find areas to target, if you want to find areas you should be working in, if you're looking at this data, I'd recommend you talk to me. I want to show you one other thing as well. I assume that we have quite a few third sector with us. So let's also see where the Department for Health and Social Care have not been giving enough money. So if you're applying for grants to do this, you could have a look and use this as evidence in your bids. You can use this as data as well. I think, is that our whistle-stop tour enough? Is there some more I should cover? I want to keep us on track.
Well, the tour's open. And I find that when James gives these presentations, people always have questions where they're like specific to their job. So you've got a quick opportunity before we do the panel discussion. If there's anyone in the room where you're actively working in this area, is there anything else you think, oh, could you show us that at that level? I mean, it is down to like cats and how it
It's more just a question. I wonder if you could... Can you use the microphone, please? Because it's all being recorded.
Yeah, cheers. I wonder if you can compile this with DESNES's subnational consumption statistics too. Not sure if you have a consumption angle to this already, but
you've reminded me of a really important bit, the bit I forgot to mention. We are really keen, if you are using this tool, that you can put your data into this and share it in a GDPR compliant way and view it with this data as well. So we don't have the DESNES stuff in there yet, but if you had it, you could put it in and view it and share it as well. So Bill, for example, there is a platform here that if you wanted to put that data in, you don't have to have any GDPR concerns, and you could view that data too. But thank you. Yes, I'll make a note and I'll see if I can track that down.
Just the 2 hands that are up, and then we'll...
So I'm Sandy from 7Y. We do a warmth on prescription programme in Gloucestershire. But I'm just wondering, how detailed does that go? Because I saw you had COPD and various other things on there. But that... So could it create a mailing list, is effectively what I'm asking.
I can answer that, because I worked on a project where James is very helpful for me. Not a mailing list as in, you know who lives at the addresses.
No, but of course.
Yeah, so
yeah.
we worked from a sample of something like 60,000 addresses that were potential that we could reach out to as part of the research project we were delivering, and we got that down to 3,000 with the top 10% affected by a number of different vulnerabilities. So that's health conditions, low income, and we picked those criteria and then got it to like the worst of the worst across, a lot of local authority areas.
So it won't tell you individual households that are suffering, say, with COPD, but it will give you an area. Is this? Am I right? It will give you an area where there's a high prevalence of COPD.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
So we purposefully don't go down to an individual level.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Because of the GDPR things and what we'd be doing.
Yeah.
But you go down to an output area, which is a census area. You can do postcodes, but the data is mostly modelled at a postcode level.
Okay.
So no mailing list, but certainly a list of postcodes you could use.
And a good indication of where you should have maybe what partnerships.
Hi, Helen Stockton, Head of Research at NEA. I just had a very quick question. You were saying you could import data to use for your own purposes and then potentially share it. Can you just import it for your own purposes? You don't have to share it. It's sharing the option.
100%. So I've refreshed it because I wanted to show you. This is Citizens Advice in Manchester. They receive calls on all types of things, including things like fuel debt. They've put their individual call data in there. So the person who called them, their name and address, they put it in. They've been able to share, they can view that at their level. They've been able to share a view of the data at an LSOA level with other people, including myself. So I can see their data to an LSOA level. They can see it at a much more granular level in the tool.
And that's where the partnership with Google comes in.
That's Google do that. I don't do that. Google do that. You don't have to trust me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
So we do go into a coffee break session after this. We've got about 15.
We've got the same question. Could you remind me what the name of the places that you worked? So that would really good
It's egnida innovation. I'll come and talk to you.
It should be on your the overview of the conference. It'll be on there. But yeah, reach out to any of us and we'll be able to share details. So could I ask the panel to join me at the front for the last sort of quarter of an hour of chatting before I let you all escape for some coffee? Thank you very much. And then we've got one. I hear we've got one mic, so I might inappropriately stand here to save Gareth doing a bit of running, if it doesn't feel too uncomfortable for people in the room. Yeah, so we're gonna do a bit of a whistle stop. So I guess yeah, try and keep it concise if you can. But yeah, I'd like to get a few questions in the room. Gentleman at the back with your hands up. Hand up. Sorry.
Thank you. And sorry, this is just a sort of bit of a big up for us. So I run 7Y Energy, and Jackie next to me runs the Warmth on Prescription programme, where we get referrals from GPs and pay people's bills over the winter. But the NHS have now got to the point where they are doing what you're doing in Derbyshire, which is to begin to sort of help and support retrofit around eco and that kind of thing. So I suppose my question is, can we be involved in that national group? Because
yes.
I think it would be great. Yeah, thank you.
We would like to talk to you
cool.
more. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and that's essentially sort of what we're talking about. I'm going to bang on because Rob's words are just perfect for this, but absolutely the art of how we do all of this. So how we get really creative with what we're doing anyway and have some of these conversations. Conferences are great for that, aren't they? You know, we're all in the same room for one day, locked in together to have some of these. But yeah, beyond this, definitely. Guys, did you want to say anything else on other than my yes?
I wanted to thank Jeremy. I didn't realise we were being recorded when I was having a little go at the Housing Association. Sorry about that. I thought it was just an off-the-record thing. No, well, I mean, actually, just to put that into perspective, our biggest problem is we have a shortage of mental health social workers. And that, you know, if you want to guarantee yourself a job, I'm sure you've all got jobs, go and train to become a mental health social worker and you will be inundated with clients. And that's our problem, in the sense that we can't support all the people out there that need the help. On record, thanks to Jeremy and Affordable Warmth Solutions for funding loads and loads of the coal-fired back boiler replacements over the last few years. On the record. Yeah,
no, absolutely. Yeah. And again, sessions are recorded, so you'll be able to catch up. But if you weren't in, we heard at length sort of the tens of thousands of households that have been supported by the sort of large-scale affordable warmth solution programme. So to everyone involved in that, thank you very much. The gentleman at the back was, yeah, it's fine, we can do both. Hi, thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, question for Leah and Bill, I think, mainly, and actually building on the last question. So I was really interested to hear about GPs doing referral, because the last time I saw the throwing people into the river and picking them out presentation was actually the RCGP when they were trialling software that would allow GPs to do referrals. 5 years on, it feels like we've largely given up on trying to engage with primary care, and the NEA Marie Curie research shows that actually the most interesting engagement seems to be coming from hospital trusts, integrated care trusts, etc., etc. So I was going to ask, is there any mileage left in the primary care agenda? But it sounds as though there may well be.
Do you want to just chip in on that? I mean, the top and bottom of it is that GPs, wonderful people that they are, they really tend to only do what they get paid for, don't they? And they have a quality outcome framework, which is like their menu of things that they deliver. And there's about 30-odd things on there. And so we initially identified them. We picked out the QOFs that related to that were health conditions that were related to the cold. And we said to them, can you filter through your database and pick out these 5 QOFs which link to respiratory, blah, blah, blah. And that's how we thinned down health conditions that they would get paid for if they referred people to our programme. So that made sense to them. Some of them still wouldn't pay for the postage. we had to pay for the postage. In fact, it was a nightmare. But anyway, but so really, yeah, and because they don't go into people's homes as much as they used to, GPs, do they? If ever, they didn't really know. So, and we didn't really have proper insight into the homes. We knew they were poorly, but we didn't know what was going on in the home. So in a way, that primary care link, we get references from them for eco funding, where a GP can sign someone off and say, oh, this person needs a grant, basically. But other than that, we don't have a lot to do with them. No. So.
I end up giving loads of data to lots of different projects, and one of the things which they find really difficult is you can find where the people are who need help, but getting them to believe what they're going to get and trust you and let you into the house is really hard. GPs are one of the people that people really trust. As I mentioned yesterday about people aged 55 and above, GPs are really well trusted, and they are such a good source of this. So if it can happen, I found the projects which have worked best have been the ones that have involved them.
That's the reason why we picked them in the first place, because they're trusted people, aren't they?
So yeah, I was involved in a project a number of years ago, before NEA Life, in the Outer Hebrides, where they were trialling sort of the social prescription link workers in rural communities on the island life through the GPs, and we did focus groups with the GPs, and they were sort of similar. We've got 30 things to report on, and we really struggled to tick that box. But also the preventative stuff from a GP's mindset. They said we've been in all this like a decade or more of training to deal with problems when they've happened, and you're now asking us to think about preventative, and our brains just don't work that way. It's really awful, but it's really difficult to adjust all of that learning. So if you've been a GP for 25 years on an island, asking you then to think what might be making that person sick isn't their job. It's to give them the right medication to stop them being as sick. And so that was a really big problem. And so other parts of the health sector were seen as really mobilised that. Your occupational therapists, your community COPD nurses, and all of that were the real. They got it and they needed it, and social care again, I guess. And then the other thing I think around the Marie Curie work that NEA that we've delivered with Leah and team, the ICBs were great, but that was in response to freedom of information requests. So the real test is to understand what's happening on the ground for us to get in rooms with the people involved in those strategic directions and the energy behind that to see what's actually happening on the ground, because like we said with the limitation, we sent out an FOI, and to 39 ICBs, 36 wrote back graciously telling us what brilliant things they were doing. But we need to get in the rooms and understand what that activity looks like and what those discharge teams are doing and so on. So that's kind of the next step in some of that work. The blue lanyard at the back. Sorry, Heather.
No.
You are absolutely next. I promise.
I'll be quick. Heather Critchlow from NEA. It was just to pick up on the warm home prescription project, which has been mentioned. NEA have also been involved in that pilot. So we got our referrals from social prescribers for that initiative. And obviously it's about giving energy advice and also credits for covering people's energy bills. But the sort of longer term benefit from that, some of the evaluation we saw coming out of that was that 76% had said that they, after their prescription, they felt not only the improvements to their mental health, self-reported improvements, but they felt more likely to be able to then think about making future energy efficiency improvements in their property. So thinking sort of longer term, not only mental well-being improvements, but transition to net zero, all of these kind of health initiatives that feeds through to that work as well. So it's just a bit of an observation.
Yeah, no, really good point. Some of that breathing space stuff is just can't be understated, the value of that, yeah.
So I think it's quite a similar question to the previous one, to be honest. But
that happens when you have to wait 8 goes to ask your question. Sorry.
It's all right. So what in your experience have you found? I guess we're sort of just trying to start that relationship a little bit with the public health side of things. What, in your experience, possibly some of the better ways, the more effective ways that you've found to engage maybe public health professionals, but also the sort of health professionals you see on the ground as well. So like maybe like GPs, primary care, those sorts of people as well. I don't know if you've got any experience with those sorts of things.
Yeah, and I think that's a really, really good question, and I'm going to hand that to panel. Can we go to maybe Leah first and do a run across? I think that's very fair. Thank you. What's the one thing we can do to be engaging the health?
Well, we're just like an FY team now, because we did a report on medical devices in the home, the use of medical devices in the home, and we published that report in the summer of this year. And I reached out to all the NHS trusts in England, Wales and Northern Ireland, because Scotland were doing their own thing at the time. But I think it was about 84 out of the 200 or odd so NHS trusts in England said they don't hold this information. It would be too costly to have this information. They still hold this information on paper, and they wouldn't be able to give this to you us. So we asked a number of questions, you know, how many people in your area are using oxygen concentrators, nebulizers, hemodialysis, things like that, everyday use of equipment that people need in the home. And they had no information to give us. They had no numbers on the amount of people in their area that they gave oxygen concentrators to. I'm not sure, were they waiting for them to come back? I don't know what the process is for that. But it was just astounding to us that this information is not held and nobody seems to know. And there's also only rebate schemes for oxygen concentrators. There is a rebate scheme for hemodialysis. There's a public strategy, a national strategy for it. But I think out of all the 200 or so English NHS trusts we reached out to, 2 were providing rebate schemes for people using hemodialysis at home. So that, again, is another reason why patients are going into hospitals unnecessarily, because they're choosing between either a hot meal or powering their oxygen concentrator, things like that. So it's been a bananas time for Marie Curie trying to reach this information and understand why this isn't readily available.
On the medical devices thing as well, I think it came up in one of the plenaries yesterday around we've still got a really limited understanding of what medical dependent energy use even means. And we heard yesterday somebody talking about autism, and this came up in work that we did with gypsy and traveller communities as well, is that what, you know, having TV, music, lighting, all of this sort of calming sensory stuff, we don't yet understand what medically dependent energy use means, and even the more extreme sort of chemodialysis examples are completely unknown. So when we trickle that down to what does energy and keeping our health sustained look like, a really big unknown area.
A couple of observations really. First of all, I'm going to talk about ventilation again, like I always do. That strikes me as it uses energy compared to not ventilating, so that should be understood in all the energy support. And also, as a matter of referral, even if someone's home is warm, if somebody's going into a home and finding damp and mould, then it strikes me there ought to be a mechanism whereby whoever is in the home and sees the issue can access ventilation the way that they can hopefully access, all the way from a new heating system to a heated throw to whatever else to address the cold. It's just as important, as equally as important. And just a question to my fellow panellists here. Are health visitors going into homes a thing anymore? They were when I had kids. Oh, yeah, health visitors. So they haven't been mentioned.
We haven't mentioned them, no. Yes.
Yeah. There's community nurses and people, they've all different sort of names really. They will exist, yeah. I don't have a lot to do with them, I must admit. But
whichever order is fine. How do we engage in better, James? With data?
Oh, I'm a data person, so data.
Yes.
Obviously the answer.
I agree.
I mean, we can show levels of health outcomes in areas with the data, and you can use that to show how much it's costing. I suppose that would be my answer. But like Leah just said, there's huge inconsistency with how things are reported in different areas and how things are approached. So if we can get more consistency, then you can definitely start to draw that out. Right now, I think you can, like I say, I've got a baseball bat and you can use it.
I guess it'd be really interesting where we're coming up against examples where people say we don't hold that data, getting really comfortable with going, why not?
Yeah.
How can we help you?
What's the risk of you not sharing that data with me compared to the risk of that data being abused?
Yeah.
If we don't help that person, they're at much greater risk than the risk of losing that data or misusing it. Actually, that's the point we've made before. Really quickly, cold weather plan for England, that's public health's sort of thing. And in that, they have to prepare for the winter. Around October-ish, they should be setting up, in our council we have a winter pressure hotline that sort of comes online around October, runs till about February, and we get loads of referrals to my project through that hotline. They filter people in, they go, oh, that's someone for Bill's team. And so, if you want to get public health, say what you're doing over the winter about, I can't remember what rank it is, your response level, number 1 in the winter. And we found from the statistics for the referrals that come into that call centre that heating and inability to keep warm is the number 1 thing. It was higher than financial pressures, funnily enough. I was quite surprised. I thought people would be ringing and going, I'm skinned. But actually, more people rang in saying they were worried about the cold and what can we do about it. So that was quite interesting.
Thank you. And there was definitely, the lady in there.
Hi there, Linda Tukey, and I work for a housing association. My question is mainly for Kate, I think. like I said, I work for a housing association, and we build about 1,600 homes a year, or we work in partnership with other people that build 1,600 homes for us a year. And the various heating, and I would like to say ventilation, but I'm not sure that it is particularly well thought about, schemes that are installed cause a lot of confusion to people, and I'm sure that a lot of people don't know how to use the heating system. I mean, in this room, do we all know how to use our boiler properly? Do we know to top it up if the pressure goes? I had to YouTube it to find that out, you know, which is it's a great thing. But do you think, Kate, that the improvement in artificial intelligence or technology is going to help people to do that? Because we'll be able to say to the boiler or the system, you know, turn up, turn down, increase ventilation, you know, and actually we won't need to know how it works. We'll just be able to talk to it.
Well, it's kind of yes and no, really. I think, I mean, certainly to plug my particular interest, with a passive house home, yes, you do need to understand that the ventilation has to keep running, but it should be very, very simple, because it needs so little in terms of heat that they tend to sort of keep themselves comfortable. I think there's lots of issues with interoperability, as in, you know, you buy a Nest and then you change energy company, or somebody moves house and they've got the control of your heating still, and so I don't think we're there yet. I mean, I would like to see heating systems that you kind of don't need to fiddle with, because they're installed properly and they're designed to run at a low temperature a lot of the time, nice big emitters, which is a heat pump system. But yes, I mean, a thermostat that you can, I think Switchy do these systems where you can tell it that you're a bit warm or a bit cool. So the technology is there, but I don't think it's a substitute for building proper building, retrofitting well, and putting in good, effective services. I do think the tech is got a huge potential for landlords. I think landlords can find out a lot about who is vulnerable, how people are living from the tech, and they can also assess the performance of their stock, find out which homes are cooling down quickly overnight, so leaving people at 3 a.m. going to the loo and falling over on the cold floor, versus the ones that are keeping the heat. That kind of information, which I don't know if people are familiar with. Switchy is one of the big companies that do this, but they put the sensors in the home, which is partly a thermostat for the occupant to use, but it also feeds back information to landlords about moisture content, temperature, and also occupancy. And obviously there are data issues around it, but it's very good at giving an early warning if a house is getting colder and damper, and then it'll say, you know, it'll notice someone stopped heating and it will alert you, and then you find out someone's lost their job, and so you can refer them for fuel vouchers, that kind of thing. So
brilliant. Yeah.
And if any people from landlords do want to find out more specifically about Passive House, shameless plug, there is a lot of free training from the Passive House Trust, so do help yourselves to that.
Now, we are just a few minutes over time, and I'm going to let everybody get back, but I just wondered if I could be that nightmare chair to the panel. Energy crisis, this is going to be the worst winter for the most vulnerable. It's going to be worse, far worse than last winter. And I just wondered, what's the one thing sort of in your area of work, or call to the people that you work with in how we do a little bit more, how we move a little bit more in the right direction to minimise the harms of the crisis this winter. Yeah, just one quick.
Great, me first.
Sorry, Leah.
Yeah, I mean, so many people, terminally ill people, are going to die this winter because they can't turn on their heating. Helen's story was in the Telegraph, I think it was last week, talking about she's been living with cancer for the last number of years, and she only turns on her heating in February. She walks around with a hot water bottle, sheepskin boots on, everything wrapped up. And, you know, she is at real risk of dying much sooner because she cannot afford to turn her heating on. And she is of pension age, so she does get, you know, the warm home discount, things like that, the winter fuel payment, but it's not enough. It's not enough. So we're trying to work with people like NEA and other energy companies to to kind of lobby them to support these vulnerable people. And the issue is that a lot of the time the vulnerable people don't often put their hands up. So it's things like Kate was saying, to identify the vulnerable people, because they're going without to pay their energy bills often as well. So they don't on the surface look like they're struggling, but underneath it all they really are. So yeah, I guess we're just trying to action for terminally ill people and support them in the best way that we can, and that's unfortunately money.
Thanks, Leah.
I think we've got an exacerbation coming down the line with dampness, because people were cold last winter and they didn't heat, their buildings didn't dry out. The summer, and particularly the late summer, a lot of driving rain, moisture's again getting into masonry, and again people aren't going to be heating the houses. So I think we're going to have penetrating damp, we're going to have cavity wall insulation failure possibly. So short term, I don't know what we can do other than account for people needing to keep their houses even warmer and even better ventilated to drive off that damp. It's just the same thing, only another layer on top, really, unfortunately.
Problem coming, yeah. No, thanks.
I think there's some amazing stuff being done, certainly from my project partners, not least NGN, but being able to target that work in a way that Bill's able to do, but being able to do that on a larger scale through things like being able to find and share data in a way that makes sense. I'm going to say that I'm a data person, aren't I? Yeah. I think it's possible. I think it's a solvable problem. I think actually people need to start doing the data.
Everyone around the table type, yeah.
It's really, we're just going to carry on doing what we're doing. But the big elephant in the back of the room is the fact that most local authorities are skinned. And so my main priority is to try and protect my budget for next year. Well, I know we've got it, but they'll try and get their hands on anything on it. It's not statutory, what we do. And, you know, we're facing £33 million debt in Derbyshire to clear. And so anything could go. You know, this project could be gone next year. So I think my priority is to try and somehow get it pinned down as a project that has been going for so long, and it's co-funded by everybody else, and it saves money and everything else. And we need to continue it. So that's my challenge in terms of helping people, really.
That's brilliant. Yeah, thank you so much. Can we thank the panel in the usual way? So I've got even more good news if you weren't feeling rushed enough by the morning. We're going to try and start the next session early because we want to be as considerate as possible for everybody trying to travel home in what continues to be a bit disastrous times with public transport. So we're going to make our way back to the main area. There's coffee and refreshments, but if you could all try and be back in the room in a little bit before midday so that we can get going, but there'll be some announcements on that side. But yeah, we've got the longest journey to make, so if you end up wandering into the room once the session started, don't worry too much. And thank you very much. Thanks, guys. No, thank you.